From the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis, this is Indiana Issues. Here's your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz.
Hello and welcome to Indiana Issues. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Well, there's talk of impeachment in Washington, D.C. A new candidate enters the race for governor, and crime and violence in downtown Indianapolis. How will that impact the rest of the state? To talk about that and a couple other things are our panel of political pundits, our good friend, Libertarian Lindsey Marie. Lindsey, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Our good friend, Democrat Laura Beck. Laura, thanks for joining us. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
My counterpart in political reporting crime, Eric Berman from WIBC Radio Network Indiana. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And everybody's conservative commentator, radio talk show host, Kendall. Robert, thank you. Good to have you here.
I'm glad you could have me on.
We are too. So let's go ahead and start with the big news of this week. An impeachment inquiry underway regarding President Donald Trump and his conversations with the president of Ukraine. Did or did not the president ask the Ukrainian government to sort of speed up an investigation into possible criminal charges against Vice President Joe Biden? Eric, can you, from a straight news perspective, is this what this has all been sort of building up to, and this is now the dominant news headline from here through 2020?
Well, I don't know about through 2020, but certainly through the remainder of 2019 and probably into the early part of 2020. I mean, an impeachment proceeding against a president is a big thing. It's only happened in a serious way 3 times, now 4. Yeah, this is definitely the dominant headline, and in fact may, in terms of 2020, may suck the air out of the room on the primary side for the Democrats for a little bit.
Rob Kendall, you're obviously a big Donald Trump supporter on your radio show. Is this something serious, or is this just a political witch hunt?
I said from day one being the day he was elected, he will be impeached. They had no choice. They were looking for the opportunity to do it, especially since they took back the House of Representatives. They would have found something eventually. They will not stop.
Lindsey?
I agree. I think at this point they've been looking so hard to find something. A couple of times they've even cried wolf on having something. At this point, their eyes are lit up and their eyes on the prize.
Laura, let me ask you about that. Is this one of the situations where Democrats, like Robin Lindsey said, have been looking for something to sort of hang Donald Trump's hat on, that now they may actually have something, but now it's more like the boy who cried wolf? It's been this investigation, but now, hey, here's something that might actually have legitimacy to it. But it's sort of overplayed by all the previous sort of investigations that have been out there.
I don't know if I'd say it's been overplayed by them. I think Speaker Pelosi's been very clear from day one that she did not want to pursue impeachment. She did not want to walk into a strategy like what the Republicans did in 1994, for example. So she's been pretty clear about that. I think because of, they've let she's kept most of the investigations down to the committee level. And I think because of the nature of this and the seriousness of it, I mean, it was essentially a shakedown of a foreign country that needs our help and has to have our help against Russia, right? Because of how it all played out. And now, after hearing about the McGuire hearing yesterday, kind of the circumstances by which it all came about with the whistleblower, I think she probably realized that, okay, this is one where this is actually an impeachable offense. You can talk impeachment if there are not offenses that are necessarily impeachable, but this actually really is based on the allegation from the whistleblower and how it's all coming out. So that's kind of my take on it from the Democrat perspective. I do think some of these Democrats, though, I think one of the issues is, you think about some of the younger freshman legislators. When you run on impeachment, it makes it a little harder to actually it makes it a little harder for you to say, oh, this is not that it's an impeachable offense, but it makes it a little harder to look like you're being impartial. So I think what the speaker has tried to do was to keep that level of impartiality, to remind these folks that, yeah, you might want to do this now, but it's going to take some time to get there.
Rob, let me ask you, because a lot of the sort of the response to the impeachment talk has been to attack the whistleblower, attack what they wrote, saying, well, the whistleblower wasn't there, they didn't have firsthand knowledge of what transpired. In the media business, there are a lot of times a lot of us aren't in the room, but that doesn't mean our facts are wrong. It just means that we weren't there. I mean, is this something that the president should be worried about?
Well, there's only one person running for president who's on tape with a quid pro quo saying to the Ukraine, if you don't do something, I'm going to withhold money. And his name ain't Donald Trump. It's Joe Biden. if the president of the United States, who is technically the chief law enforcement officer of the country, cannot tell another foreign leader that his chief deputy, which is essentially that's what the attorney general is, we believe there's something going on here, get with the attorney general to look into this, then anybody who's ever running for president can't be investigated. The Democrats didn't get that memo because they've been investigating Trump for 3 years.
But can you do that, Lindsey? It's one thing to say, hey, Mr. Chernenko, whatever, we would appreciate your cooperation in X, Y, Z, but when it's kind of tied to, oh, by the way, if you want this, if you want this, you want this, then you better get with the program. Does that taint, somewhat that there might have been some legitimacy to the president's charge about possible wrongdoing, even though there's been no real evidence to back that up? That quid pro quo, if I may use my Latin phrase of the day.
I just want to point out, I'm not the one using Latin.
Right. Or as other people have said, the mob shakedown.
The mob shakedown.
Right.
So I think with the transcript that came out, I think if you are on the left, you're going to read into what you already believe in the right. I don't think that there was anything groundbreaking that would have changed anyone's minds in what came out. It's sort of confirmation bias. But I think you made a really good point when you talk about now the talk is turning to the whistleblower. And we saw this with Snowden, that what happens is the media and a lot of people in politics will focus on the whistleblower and not the allegations. And I don't necessarily think that's fair because you're pivoting from what is actually the issue. You're trying to either determine credibility or ruin credibility. It shouldn't be about that person. It should be the allegations. And it's interesting to me now that the Democrats want to protect these whistleblowers because under Obama, he actually prosecuted twice as many whistleblowers than anybody else. I think that at this point, we need to also talk about if you go through the proper channels, what does that look like? And we've seen what Trump's come out and said today. Is there ever a proper channel? Is that even a possible thing?
Eric, let me get your thoughts on this before we jump to our next one.
Well, yeah, there's a proper channel, and the whistleblower went through it. He followed the letter of the law. I think Lindsey's conflating whistleblowers and leakers. There were leak prosecutions under Obama. Whistleblowing is a specific legal process set out by statute. That's what this person, whoever it is, has been doing. And I'm not sure I share the opinion that the focus is shifting to the whistleblower. The focus still seems to be on the call. And what surprised me about the whistleblower complaint is that it doesn't really add much to what had already come out in the Washington Post and other places about the call itself, and then the transcript came out the day before the complaint was released. The only new thing I thought in the complaint, once it came out, was this notion of locking down the records of the administration saying, oh, God, what did he just say, and moving it to a different server.
Let me throw up a couple quotes here from a couple members of our Indiana delegation. You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz. Our guests today are Libertarian Lindsey Marie, Democrat Laura Beck, Eric Berman of Network Indiana and WIBC, and conservative radio talk show host Rob Kendall. Jim Banks, Congressman, 3rd Congressional District, put this up. Growing up, my parents taught me not to give my opinion on matters I know nothing about, else I'd look foolish. Speaker Pelosi announced an impeachment inquiry based off a rumor the other day. Now we've all seen the transcript. The rumor has been proven false. Speaker Pelosi and House Democrats look foolish. Different reaction from Pete Vislowski, Congressman of the 1st Congressional District up in northwestern Indiana, saying I support Speaker Pelosi's announcement that the U.S. House of Representatives is moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry. As chairman of the House Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, I am greatly concerned that the conduct of the president continues to threaten the safety and security of our nation and allies. Given the seriousness of the president's actions, I believe the speaker's announcement is warranted. Is this, real quickly, folks, what this universe is just going to look like now is just Democrats here, Republicans here, and that's just how it's going to be going here on out? Anybody feel free to chime in.
I think Alexander Hamilton said it best in the Federalist Paper 65, that when you go through these impeachment proceedings, what it does is it just basically reignites factions that already exist. You don't change the minds of an entire community. You're just reaffirming what people already believe.
I think we are going to see people divide under party and divide, maybe not so under party, but maybe divide on how they feel about Trump. Because Mitt Romney, I know, appeared to be holding his fire after he wanted to look and review everything. What's concerning to me is that at some point in time, you do have to look beyond self-preservation and power. And what does that mean for the country? You're an elected official. You're serving in this role. And to see someone like a Jim Banks, it's not surprising. But at the same time, it would be nice if some folks put a little bit more critical thought into what the allegations are. If Obama did this, or if Bill Clinton did this, or if any Democrat did this, the Republicans would have them sliced, diced, and quartered on the town square. So it's really important, I think, that you have to apply an equal lens to it.
Let me get Rob in here real quick before we jump to our next topic.
Well, Bill Clinton was impeached because he was caught on camera lying under oath. I mean, you can't get any more guilty than that. But there's a lesson to be learned from that. I'm totally fine with the Democrats impeaching Trump, and I hope they go through with it, because the American people are very adamant, as they were with Bill Clinton, who was caught red-handed. We can dislike our politicians. We can throw these people out of office, but you don't get to do that for us. If Bill Clinton came out and the Democrats came out better under Clinton, caught red-handed, the Republicans will do the same. So I go ahead and impeach him.
Don't forget, though, his vice president, Bill Clinton's vice president, ran for election and lost. So there were some repercussions for that down the road.
The voters make that decision, though.
Right.
The voters are adamant in this country. We have the right to hate our politicians, and we have the right to say we made a bad choice, but you don't get to do it for us.
But there does come a point where you do have to take your stand.
Oh, and I'm all for it.
they're
I hope they
taking
take
their
a great
stand on
big
that.
stand.
And
That's wonderful.
And there also does come a point we got to jump to our next topic real quick here, which is former National Intelligence Director Dan Coats, U.S. Senator in Indianapolis this past week, saying he felt bad as for Acting Director, National Director Joe McGuire, who stepped in just as all this was sort of breaking out. Eric, you were actually there when Dan Coats at the Economic Club of Indiana made his comments. Let me get your chime in. How do you think the former U.S. Senator and National Intelligence Director's comments will factor into all of this?
It won't. It would have been different if his timing hadn't been quite so good. And both he and Director McGuire got a sort of rueful laugh about that this week. McGuire on the stand before the committee and Coates in that appearance. I left on the 15th and it landed on Joe's desk on the 16th. I feel so bad for Joe. And he got a nice laugh out of that. But yeah, he was his timing was excellent, which was basically McGuire's statement. I think Dan Coates is basically free to enjoy retirement for the most part.
Lindsey, you spent a lot of time with connections out in the D.C. area. Are you here to think about maybe Dan Coates and all this being called back to to testify or speak before Congress? Mr. National Intelligence Director, what did you know and when did you know it?
I haven't heard anything directly from anyone in particular, but there's a lot of stuff starting to circulate in the press about the timeline of when Trump asked him to resign, when he actually resigned, when the phone call happened. And the timeline is actually pretty interesting when you start breaking down day by day. So I wouldn't be surprised if they called him back to testify. It seems pretty suspect when you look at it. I'm not saying he knows something, but there's definitely an argument to be made that he might actually know something.
Laura, let me ask you, because if Dan Coates is called back to offer testimony in front of Congress, not necessarily what would he say, but what do you think his demeanor would be? Is he that that quote unquote that profile and courage, that one person who says, hey, this timeline isn't working, or does he just go along with the kind of traditional party line? This is a witch hunt.
I don't know. I've always gotten the sense that less of a profile and courage, but somebody who is attempting to do the right thing. I guess I have a different opinion. I never feel too sorry for these folks because this is the job you signed up for. It is. When you work for an elected official or when you are an elected official, this is part of the responsibility, and you take an oath, and this is what your job is. But I think he is certainly someone who is well schooled and well versed in testifying and testimony. So I don't think he'll have any problem whatsoever.
Rob, let me get you before we take a break here. What do you think Dan Coates' role in all this is going to be, or will he have a role at all?
Well, Dan Coates is the king of quitting a job, moving away, bad-mouthing the people in question, and then coming back when the opportunity arises to get rehired. So, I mean, Dan Coates will do whatever's best for Dan Coates.
Still holding a grudge from 2010.
No qualms. No, I mean, I'm just saying, if you're going to move to North Carolina and say how great North Carolina is,
don't tell the good people of Indiana.
It's a darndest thing that you just found your Hoosier roots again when you could become a senator. This guy will do whatever is best for him and his buddies and the people he's connected to.
You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz. We're going to take ourselves a quick break, get our panel to get a little bit of water, and blow their blood pressure down just a tad and get over past grievances. And when we come back, we'll talk about a recent shooting in downtown Indianapolis, what it means for possibly the rest of the state, and also a new candidate in the race for governor. You're watching Indiana Issues. We'll be right back. Indiana Issues. I'm Abdul-Hakim. Welcome back to Indiana Issues. There we go. Get my microphones back on. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazi, editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Our political panel today is Libertarian Lindsey Marie, Democrat Laura Beck, Eric Berman of Network Indiana and WIBC Radio, and Rob Kendall, conservative radio talk show host. Big news this past week out of downtown Indianapolis. Mass shooting, because it met the definition of a mass shooting, which is more than 3 people, 6 people shot in Indianapolis. Police still looking for the juvenile suspect possibly involved. Fortunately, no one was killed. And at the same time, a major change in the prosecutor's race. We have Marion County Prosecutor Terry Curry stepping down because of a resurgence and rebound with prostate cancer. We've got 2 candidates sort of vying for that job, one the longtime deputy prosecutor, another one special counsel for the mayor. Eric, let me start with you. What does all this mean for Indianapolis, and the highlight for public safety?
Honestly, in the big picture, I'm not sure it means a lot. The race for prosecutor is going to be interesting. I mean, one of them it's a little reminiscent of the Carl Brizzi's final reelection, where Carl Brizzi's entire campaign was built around I'm an experienced prosecutor, and hint, side whisper, Melina Kennedy isn't. Melina Kennedy was the mayor's right-hand woman, had been an attorney in the administration. Very close race. Carl Brizzi ended up winning. This isn't a general election. This is a Democratic caucus. And that changes the dynamic of the voting quite a bit, to say the least. Whether that particular argument carries the day or not, I guess we'll find out when the precinct leaders meet. But in terms of the long-term consequences for anyone other than Ryan Mears and Tim Moriarty and those around them, I'm not sure I see it. I'm sure either one will run the office.
Laura, let me get you to chime in on that, because you actually did work for Terry Curry when he was prosecutor for a while. You have some experience and the dynamics of that office. What is the job of a prosecutor? Like I said, not asking you to make a judgment call between either Democrat.
Right.
But when we talk about the job of a prosecutor, is it somebody who just prosecutes cases, or is it spelling out a division? What does that job actually entail?
Well, I was really, just on a personal note, I was really, frankly, really sad to see Terry resign. I was a consultant to him for 4 years and really enjoyed the experience immensely because, first of all, he is an excellent prosecutor. He's an excellent person, and he's also one of the healthiest people I know. So I know he's in a good state of mind about moving forward. But still, it's incredibly sad because we're losing such a strong public servant. It's an incredibly important job. You have to be very level-headed, which Terry is, and you also have to be very thoughtful about sometimes public opinion may sway in one way, right? So you had the Bebe Schway case, for example, but the law says something else, and you have to make you have your prosecutorial discretion, where you have to make some really tough decisions, and people are not always going to be happy with you. And there were many times where people were happy with him, people weren't happy with him, the general public, for example. But then you also work really closely with the police department and all the different law enforcement agencies, not just IMPD, but all the other law enforcement agencies. You are working on community prosecution. You have criminal justice issues. And then you've got child support. The child support division runs through the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. And then you also have to manage an office. You have all of these very highly qualified lawyers, paralegals, office professionals who work for the prosecutor's office. And it's an incredibly complex job. I mean, I really don't think Terry ever took any time off. I mean, I remember one year coming in and it was over the holiday break, and I was working on wrapping up, it was called the Report to the Community, where he would do sort of this compilation of all of the different cases and everything that was disposed of in a year. And it was the day after Christmas, and he was like, "Hey, are you coming in?" And I was like, "Sure. I don't have anything to do." And he's kind of wandering around the office, and there's, you could shoot a cannon down the halls, and Terry's cleaning out his office, getting organized for the new year. So he was someone who stayed pretty close to home the entire time he was there, and was really looped and networked in.
Well, whoever is the next prosecutor, one of the cases they're going to have to deal with is the shooting we had in downtown Indianapolis last weekend as we were tape and record this program. Rob, as somebody who resides outside of Indianapolis and over in Hendricks County, when you see the story about the shooting that take place, what kind of goes through your head?
Well, we talked about this on our State House Happenings show that'll air Sunday at 6 a.m. on WIBC, which is when it's mugshot on mugshot violence. Because I've talked with you about, hey, how does Hogsett still appear to have this lead in the mayoral race? I mean, there's all this violence in the roads and everything else, and he had said, a lot of times the violence doesn't resonate with people when it's mugshot on mugshot violence in a neighborhood where mugshot on mugshot violence tends to occur. When it starts happening downtown in places that affluent people shop, on places that affluent people go, people who mind their own business, who are abiding by the law, they start to take note, and it has a chance to have a real impact on economic development downtown, because do people from the suburbs, from the donut counties, when they have the option to go to Carmel or Broad Ripple or places like that, do they want to risk spending their dollars downtown?
Lindsay, I thought it was interesting because this actually made CNN.
I saw that.
The shooting incident. Like I said, hang your head down in the Evansville area. You see this, what's going on in, downtown Indianapolis, what kind of goes through your head?
It's crazy to see that headline on CNN. In Evansville, though, there wasn't as much talk about it. I think if you would see this headline for Chicago, other cities, you would that's sort of what you kind of have come to know. But Indy's a little bit different, especially, it wasn't necessarily the 6th number, it was the word mass shooting or mass shooter, because that has a little bit of a different effect on you. But yeah, that was something that was interesting to see make it national headlines.
Eric, before you change topics, should folks from outside of the Mile Square be concerned about what took place? Because we think about the industry, commerce, tourism that Indianapolis and the entire state depends a lot on as part of our sources of revenue. That incidents like this can have a deleterious effect.
Well, I mean, certainly they can, but the plural of anecdote is not data. I mean, this is one incident. There are other crimes, none on this level of seriousness. Anything that affects the downtown has to be a concern on that level. I think you had the statistic 11% of the state's income, not the cities, but the state's, comes from the Mile Square. So, yeah, anything that happens there is concern, but it's one incident. It could just as easily have happened on the north side or the south side. It happened to be downtown where they all were.
I just want to thank you for reminding us that Rob is in Hendricks County, because if you are not friends with Rob on Facebook, you're really missing out, because I feel like I know everything that's going on in Hendricks County because we're friends on Facebook.
Exactly. You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Our guests there are Libertarian Lindsey Marie, Democrat Laura Beck, Eric Berman of Network Indiana, WIBC, and Rob Kendall, a conservative radio talk show host. Another Democrat enters the race for governor, Josh Owens of Shelbyville, filed paperwork that he is entering the race. The 34 CEO was the CEO of Supply Kick. He wants to pay teachers more, increase accessibility for education for Hoosiers, lower the smoking rate, more protections for the LGBT community. Laura, let me start with you. Looks like you guys will have a Democratic race for governor between Josh Owens and Dr. Woody Myers.
Yeah, it's very possible. I think anytime you have qualified folks who want to step up and run for governor, I think that's a good thing. I know none of us ever like primaries because it's expensive and you fight each other, and you're beaten down and tired for the general election. So hopefully we won't have to get that far. But it's exciting to see someone who's young, someone who's a job creator, someone who has the tech background enter the race. And it's a good fresh face to have join us. I think the challenge always is for anyone who's going to run for an office like governor is, can you raise money? And that's going to remains to be seen for both.
Rob, let me get your thoughts on Josh entering the race for governor.
It's interesting. The Democrats have two candidates running who have far more private sector success than the Republican, who hasn't had a job in 25 years since he was in the Navy.
That was one of my talking points, but you took it.
I mean, it's going to be really interesting. The problem is,
what wormhole have we gone through?
I don't know. It happens when I'm on with Rob. I don't know what happens.
The problem is that Holcomb's done a really nice job of buying votes and taking money from people and giving it to other people, and that's a lot of times a Democrat Party platform. So are they going to be able to out-Democrat the current Democrat that sits in office who has an R next to his name? We'll see.
Now let's go to the voice of sanity.
That's going to be my new LinkedIn profile tagline, voice of sanity.
Lindsay's going to make her libertarian pitch, which is always
I've
very
never
good.
Heard sanity and libertarian the same sentence on national television or mainstream media, so thank you.
Your thoughts on the Democratic race for governor?
I think some people are thinking that he might be able to take some conservative votes or maybe independent votes. I don't see that happening, or libertarian votes. He is pretty, I would say, typical when it comes to things like Second Amendment rights. He obviously wants to start changing some of those laws. He also wants to change the smoking age. Things like that are not going to appeal to, and I don't want to say Republicans, I would say true conservatives and libertarians. I agree with Rob, though. Holcomb, he's liked by a lot of Democrats too, just because of a lot of things he does are aligned with them. He taxes and spends. And so I don't know if I'm a Democrat that I want to risk the devil I don't know versus the devil I know.
Eric, when you look at sort of the nature of how campaigns work, the fact that Democrats will have a contested primary between Josh Owens, Woody Myers, and also the fact that Eric Holcomb, the other Eric, is sitting on the
Eric Berman's making his announcement today.
yeah. Anyway, just after the show, we have to stop what we're doing.
If elected, I will run for the border.
Yeah, Eric Holcomb is sitting on 60+% approval rating. Do these? Where does all this go, or is it just we just see what happens through the primary system?
Well, we see what happens through the primary system. And first, lest we forget, this is the governor's race and the Senate race are the two races in Indiana where you can't just say, hey, I'm running. You've got to gather signatures. And so we'll see who actually can get the necessary 4,500 signatures. Eric Holcomb has a primary challenger in theory as well, Brian Roth. He's got to get the signatures the same as the governor and Woody Myers and Josh Owens. So we'll see who actually goes to the post in May. But this has the potential to be a very interesting primary. If Josh Owens can raise or supply the money, I don't know his ability to self-fund, but that could certainly become a competitive primary. Woody Myers has been out of public office for a quarter century. I'm not sure he's as well known as people might think to those who don't follow this closely.
Real quickly, with our panel before we do our political prognostications, will Donald Trump be a factor next year in the governor's race?
Oh, heck yeah.
He'll be a factor even if
he
it
will.
means he's not a factor.
Yeah,
in other words, if he has a significant effect for the negative, then that obviously hurts Eric Holcomb. If he doesn't have a negative effect, that by definition is a positive effect.
Well, and it'll be interesting with Holcomb because I just saw he was named one of his state co-chairs. When Trump was running and the Access Hollywood stuff came out, don't lump us all together. Yeah. And then as soon as Trump became very popular and could get guys like Mike Braun across the finish line, they became bosom buddies. I guess they're still bosom buddies. So if Trump gets impeached, it'll be interesting to see which Holcomb shows up in 2020.
It'll have an impact definitely in the suburban swing districts. You've got somebody like Christina Hale who's running in the 5th, and I think those districts are changing rapidly, and so it's going to have an effect in those too.
Lindsay, let me get your thoughts real quick for you.
No, I definitely agree. I think Holcomb's going to start moving towards the Trump direction if it's going to benefit him. And I mean, that's politics. I'm not going to knock him for it. That's the name of the game, right? But I think assuming that something catastrophic doesn't happen with Trump, I think it's going to help Holcomb regardless. It's a red state. Mike Braun did extremely well when he ran, which was kind of surprising to an extent. But at the end of the day, it's safe, I think.
All right. Well, this is the part of the program we go around the table, talk to our panel, get their political prognostications. We look in the political ether to see what we should be paying attention to. Lindsey Marie, we'll start with you.
I would watch Justin Amash pretty closely in the next couple weeks and maybe a couple months. He's currently the Michigan congressman who is a former Republican. On the 4th of July, declared his independence, became an independent, and he might be making quite the large announcement soon.
Laura?
I'm just going to pass because I can't think of anything that's so crazy other than, really. So let me think of something. Eric, you go next. It's like we're at menu at a table at a restaurant.
This is the best kind of prognostication because it can never be proven wrong. The consensus, I think, is that there's no way that the Senate is going to convict if the House impeaches. I would agree it's highly unlikely, but I think it's a little less unlikely than people are putting it. If the consensus is 5%, I think there might be a 20% chance that he actually is removed from office.
Rob?
The upcoming October Democrat debate, they've got 12 in, which means they'll have to split it into 2 sections, and that means you'll have the smallest stages, which means people might actually go at each other and not have anywhere to run, and the moderators won't have to go to the next person as fast. And will someone finally call Elizabeth Warren a fake Indian?
Laura?
I think Cecina's going to win their football game tonight. That's all I got for you. I'm day to day at this point.
Not a problem. Well, our guests today have been Libertarian Lindsey Marie, Laura Beck, Democrat Eric Berman, WIBC Radio Network Indiana, and Rob Kendall, radio talk show host. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz. Thanks for joining us from all of us here at the downtown studios at Edge Media. Thank you very much for being with us, and we'll talk to you next time on Indiana Issues.